What I'm about to share with you would be breaking news had it not been shared over 60 years ago, especially with the shocking comments that came from what would become a president of the United States in a convention of the election of 1964. We'll discuss what it is as we explore. That's right. Shocking comments coming from Ronald Reagan during a convention speech called A Time of Choosing, one of the most popular speeches in American political history. And I've heard it before, but there's some things that just you kind of brush over. They're said in passing that many people don't react to. And certainly at the time, in the heat of the election season, well, they weren't really discussing and parsing words that what would become the 40th president of the United States would say. But we're going to take a look back and listen to what he said about gold in this video. Before we get to that, I want to remind you, channel sponsor Summit Metals. They are a great, fast-growing precious metal company that you should look into if you want to see and great customer service and when buying or selling your precious metals. And if you do sell your precious metals, make sure to mention my name, Salivate Metal, when you go to sell, and you will get a better price than what's listed on their website. So check out summitmetals.com. Gold has certainly been a metal that has fascinated civilizations ever since civilization began, for the most part. In fact, we know they were first used in coins about 650 to 700 BC, mixed with silver called electrum, and in the ancient city of Lydia. Of course, now we have the modern gold coins that you see here today, but back during the 1960s, well, it was illegal to own gold. That's right, we couldn't own it ourselves, and most people had to turn in their gold, and the gold that was recognized at the time was pieces like this. You could only own 5 of these at the time, and no more. $20 gold pieces here, and that's exactly right. In fact, it would only be 3 years later, after this 1964 speech, when South Africa released their first 1-ounce gold bullion coin, the Krugerrand. And it was the most popular. It was the only one that really circulated until the late 70s. And we saw things move after Gerald Ford signed an executive order allowing us to accumulate gold yet again. But moving up to what happened during the time when gold was prohibited from owning here in the United States under Executive Order 6102, we had Ronald Reagan give his convention speech, A Time of Choosing. And I'm going to play it for you because this is quite profound. And I think it's something that we should all really, really listen carefully to see exactly what he's saying here in the context as well. Because I think there's something that's quite eye-opening and shocking here.
But I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future. No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third of its national income. Today, 37 cents out of every dollar earned in this country is the tax collector's share. And yet our government continues to spend $17 million a day more than the government takes in. We haven't balanced our budget 28 out of the last 34 years. We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce.
There it is. We don't own an ounce. $15 billion worth of gold in the treasury. Of course, now we know that number is far greater in terms of the worth of the gold in our treasury. And that's the key words. We don't own an ounce. Let that sink in. The gold is there. Who owns it? Who owns that gold? Where is it going? Is it been rehypothecated? That's what we want to know. So it's a quite eye-opening and shocking to coming from a convention speech about the gold in Fort Knox. Now, for credit, I forget who sent this link to me about this, but it really wasn't about the gold. It was the overall speech And he is so right in what he listed there. Of course, it's gotten a whole lot worse now. In fact, under President Ronald Reagan, the debt limit was raised 11 times. So in a sense, unfortunately, and I hate to say it because I am a fan of Ronald Reagan, he contributed greatly to the national debt and deficit spending. And we've been on a crash course with it ever since. And so with good intentions, once you get in office, typically that's where it gets watered down. And we're seeing that most recently with this latest bill, the Big Beautiful Bill, that incurs more debt and deficit spending. But what holds true, what holds fast, no matter how many of these dollars are printed, no matter what, gold stands true. And you look at the value of the gold that's in the U.S. Treasury that he says, look at the value of it today. But not much more or less is in the vaults than it was in 1964, if you believe it's there. And so Ronald Reagan believes it's there. He just doesn't believe that we own it. So he says, well, who owns that gold? Who has claims to it? Other nations? Now, leading up to this, especially after Bretton Woods, is many European nations, especially in the advent of World War II, sent their gold to the United States. We had over 20,000 tons of gold. Much of it was other foreign nations, but nonetheless, it was held here in the United States. And remember, it was only less than 30 years prior to this that Fort Knox was built in the middle of the country at the time, as a place that would insulate it with a landmass for the central, pretty close to the central part of the country, and they built a military base around it, Fort Knox, Kentucky. And so that is where the gold is stored. The vast majority, of course, there's other gold stored elsewhere as well, but Fort Knox was very well known at the time. In fact, I believe it was 1964, and when you had the Goldfinger James Bond movie out there, and you know the story behind that. So, notwithstanding, it's very interesting. Now, it could be that Ronald Reagan had a little bit of a verbal faux pas there. Maybe, perhaps, he made a mistake. Very eloquent speaker, obviously, throughout the time. In fact, at the beginning of the speech, he talks about how, he doesn't have a script to follow. These are his own words. But maybe he got something wrong there. Maybe he's talking about the Fed. The Federal Reserve also is a custodian of gold that's not theirs. So the U.S. Treasury and the Fed are two different entities. And so perhaps he's referring to the Fed and not the U.S. Treasury, and meant to say that, but he instead said the U.S. Treasury. Either way, it calls into question, and I'm really surprised that there was not much either outcry or concern or questions at the time. But remember, it was a passing comment at the very beginning of about a half-hour speech that had a lot of great moments in it where he talks about socialism, a time of choosing in this election. Well, they didn't choose Barry Goldwater for president, and then we got the Great Society, which really amped up all of the stuff that Ronald Reagan had been speaking out against at the time, and in many cases really made a deal with Tip O'Neill in the 80s to preserve a lot of which, in exchange to outspend the Soviet Union at the time, and that led to the end of the Cold War. But all through all of history and all of that, the gold remained the same. And so a lesson we can take from this is no matter what people say about who owns what or whether or not it's there, the gold in Fort Knox, the gold we have in our possession and that we hold is there. It is tangible. It is here for all to see. And even though it may be a little different now, here, this design is this Augustus St. Gaudens design, considered one of the most beautiful designs in American coinage, and has the eagle flying towards the west in an era of expansion and prosperity for the still relatively growing strong nation. At the time this coin was minted, Arizona was not a state yet, and there's several other states that were not joined the Union yet. Now, and it has a denomination of $20. Fast forward to modern times, we have the American Gold Eagle with the same design, a little bit more crisp in this 22 karat gold coin. And this is a different eagle, a close-up head of the eagle on the reverse, still facing towards the west. Really, in a sense, I guess, the saying, maybe in a sense that, hey, there's still some prosperity, hopefully, some hope for the future for the country. I can hope so. Some people feel this is like the head side of the coin now, since it's really up close head of the eagle, whereas this might be the tail side. And so, who knows? But nonetheless, this is the obverse. But look at the denomination, $50 this time, and about the same amount of gold, although there's a little bit more gold in the 1 ounce variety. There's 0.96 ounces here. But, and then we have a pure gold standard as well. In 2006, the very first Buffalo gold coin came out, and they were smart this time. They decided to use the traditional reverse as well as the obverse on this, a smart decision, and to give us the Buffalo gold bullion coin. So all of these, not pure gold, that's pure gold. And gold is something that's valuable, and Ronald Reagan knew that, and that's why he mentioned it in his speech. So quite profound. Let me know what your thoughts are about this speech and his words. What do you think they meant? Is there more to this? Or do you think I got it completely wrong? Let me know in the comment section below. I hope you found this video informative, insightful, and educational. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.